is Kenya, right from your highlands to the sea. You'll always stay with me, here in my heart, here in my heart.
Roger, first of all, I want to wish you a belated happy birthday. You've just had your birthday, I believe. Where were you for your 64?
That's a very good question. Where was I? I was in Salt Lake City.
Aha. Now, it's not the first time you've been there, is it?
No, no. I've been touring the States now for, let me see, 25 years.
Yeah, so I shouldn't think there are too many places that you haven't been to in the States.
I've been to most,
yeah. We were actually thinking about trying to book an ancient stripper and a stand-up comedian to make you feel at home.
You're going back a few years.
I am. Just thinking about that, looking back on all those many years ago, what is probably the lasting legacy that came out of those days in the music halls for you?
Well, they taught me my job. You know, it took me 5 years to learn how to entertain people, maybe a bit less, but definitely it's a hard lesson to learn. And once you realize that the world is your family, really, then it's fine. And about 5 years after I started singing, I started to perform concerts, which is a big step up, you know, because in these clubs and so on that you're talking about, where they had different attractions and so on, they come to see anything but you, really. They come to gamble, or they come to pick up someone, or they come to talk, or they come to do business, or they just come to eat, or they come to have a few pints of beer if they've been working in the steel mines or the coal mines or whatever. And you have to grab their attention, whereas with the theatre, people actually know what they're paying for, which is a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think a great deal more intimacy. Although once you've actually got the audience in your palm of your hand, that they can be probably the best audiences you'll ever get anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. I learned to do that in about 10 seconds.
Yeah. I want to go back a pace or two, back to Kenya.
Yeah.
Because when you were growing up there, Kenya was going through fairly troubled times. I mean, I know you personally had a very close call, and then you served in the military.
Yeah.
How did that colour your view of what is basically your homeland?
Well, you know, I think a lot of us could see something of their point of view. I mean, we realized that that wasn't the way to go about it. You can't go around cutting people's throats and behaving as the terrorists behaved. But there was some mitigating circumstance for that, to be quite honest. And we just did what was our duty. And we were called up into the army, and we did our duty, and we chased people all up and down the mountains. And frankly, I'm very happy I did, for me personally, because it changed my whole life. I became a different person.
I spent 3 years in the Royal Air Force and had exactly the same experience. And in fact, I identify with a lot of the experiences that you had.
Yeah.
They weren't quite as arduous, but they were often quite as amusing as you went through. You obviously, and I know you've said this publicly many times, that you were surrounded by music, both in your family, but also outside in the countryside. And I've often thought that African music is underappreciated, particularly the incredible drumming. How much did it, or even does it, influence what you write nowadays?
A lot. It does. It does. If I use a drum machine, it's very African. I think all modern music is very African, if you get down to the basics. It's, you know, modern pop music is basically bass and drums. And that's what Africans do. They sing the bass parts and they play the drums. And they have their little African harps, which they make out of bent pieces of wattle and a box with strings coming down. Very primitive, but it works, and they play their tunes on that. And it's very rhythmical, and it goes over and over and over and over. catchy little tunes, which is exactly what modern pop music is.
Interesting you should say that, because on my birthday, which is in August of 1964, I was in London watching people that you probably know, Andrew and Paul Tracy and Jeremy Taylor, doing a show called Wait a Minute, which featured a lot of that, and beautiful little songs called For You and such on. And I wondered if you have ever actually recorded an album just purely of African music, because it's very musical.
It is, and I've recorded some African titles, never a complete album, but a lot of African titles.
Moving forward a little bit, are you still in touch with Odina Batnagley, the little girl who...
We haven't heard from her for years.
She must be in her mid-30s by now.
She must be getting on a bit, yes. She's from the Philippines, and I want to go to Jakarta and do a concert one day.
Reading, I read your book, but I've also been reading your later history, and Canada seems to be a recurring theme. Now, you said we never discussed the Charge of the Light Brigade, but in fact the first successful recording you had a very strong Vancouver connection, because it was a ballad about the Ironworkers Memorial Bridge, which we know better as the Second Narrows here. How did that come about?
Well, somebody produced this song about the Second Narrows Bridge disaster, and it took my fancy because it was a true story. And it came through a publisher called Fred Jackson. And it was at the time when people were singing Big Bad John songs, you know, it was very masculine kind of macho stuff. And it was perfect for the time, perfect for my voice, and I recorded it. And it was a success. It was a great success. While I was still at university, I might say. So while I was doing final exams, people were rushing in and saying, "Your record's on the radio," and I'd say, "Push off, I'm busy." You know?
Actually, I was listening to, I downloaded one of the audio files off your website, which is actually a very comprehensive website, and listening to an interview, and the interviewer was saying essentially how lucky you were, and you actually concurred. You said, "Yes, well, I had a recording contract before I left university."
That's true.
But in my experience, luck is, as they say, the convergence of preparation and skill. So I mean, it wasn't entirely lucky, but I guess being in the right place at the right time has played a very large role in your life.
Yeah, I think planning and skill plays a great part in it, but sometimes it happens quite inadvertently. You know, you do something that you never had any intention of doing, or you didn't know you were going to do, and the right people are sitting there. Well, that's not planning, and it's just it's not organized in any way, and that's exactly what happened to me. And my success can really be put down to one festival that I was part of, and
that was the Knock Festival.
Yes, it was, and quite frankly, it made the difference between success and failure.
Yeah, thought there was a nice little touch of irony, because when you were talking about Knock, you said that somebody asked you why you thought you'd been so successful there, and you said, "Well, I suppose it's because you sort of people see in you what you're projecting, and you're singing a song, 'If I Were a Rich Man,' which at the time was very far, I imagine, from the truth." So I thought it was a splendid irony.
I was the poorest man you've ever met. Yeah, I did it without design. You know, that again was unplanned, because I just liked the song, and they said, "What would you like to sing in the festival?" And I went to Francis Day and Hunter, who published the song, and I said, "Would you do the arrangement for me for nothing, because I'm too poor to pay for it?" And they said, "All right." And they set somebody down, and he got the right key, and I took my music under my arm, and away I went. And I didn't know there were any prizes, and I didn't know that there were any rewards for doing this. I just went and did it, you know. And I thought, well, 2 weeks on the beach can't be bad. I'll have a little break. So I was working every week that came along. And I won the press prize and the team prize, because they didn't know the song. And it's such a wonderful song.
A question that crossed my mind, because for a period of time I also traveled extensively, and I know the peril that I paid was either I was always eating too much really rich food, or I was rushing and eating junk food. How do you control, I mean, I know you enjoy food because you've written about it, but how do you manage to control those?
Well, sometimes I don't.
Good for you. Good for you.
You know, occasionally you've got to have a break and a glass of wine or whatever. But really, you know, if you're on a heavy schedule like this, you have to be pretty strong. And I go for a year without even a glass of wine, for instance.
And you collect vintage wines?
I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I nearly said to somebody we should agree to split a bottle of Baby Duck, which has a very good secondary market as a paint stripper.
Yeah, somebody gave my sound engineer a bottle of wine with a screw top.
Yes. Oh, well, that's Canada. Talking about Canada, I want to come back because I said that's been a recurring theme. I know you had a couple of surgeries here, but didn't we all? The thing that crossed my mind was that this latest recording, which I'd like you to talk a little bit about, Awakenings, was actually partly recorded in Halifax with Rita McNeil.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about what the inspiration for this particular album was.
BMG, my record company, said to me, look, we want to do a new project album with you, and we'd like you to come up with an idea, you see. So I went away and I thought about it. And I thought, well, life is like the seasons of the year. You know, in the beginning when discipline is lifted from your neck, you know, when you leave school and you leave the army, or in your case, the Air Force, and we suddenly find life is ours, you know, and what we do depends on us, and there's no more time consequence, and there's nobody looking over your shoulder for a minute, and we're perhaps studying, and we can go to lectures or not as we wish. And you find out that not all women are like your mother, you know, then it's a very exciting time, and that's the spring of your life. And then there's the summer of your life when you do meet the woman that you never thought you'd ever meet, and you marry, and the children begin to arrive, and then comes the autumn when they begin to grow up, and you have to take a part of their life and guide it and mold it and so on, and then they leave home, and then the winter of your life starts, and you can sit down for a bit and look back and say, I wonder if I made a difference. And you know, you can if you like, pass comment, and you have a right to an opinion. I don't think anybody has a right to an opinion until he's lived a bit, you know. And so when you get to that stage, it's very interesting. And that's what this album's about. And there's 20 titles on it, and it goes through the 4 seasons.
That's a beautiful segue, because in fact you've just reached one of the transition points, haven't you? Because all your family has basically grown up and moved out.
Yes.
It gives me another couple of things to comment on, one of which I noticed, I don't know whether it's a one-time thing, but your youngest daughter Jessica sang with you on A Perfect Day.
Yeah.
Now, if I understand it correctly, your son Guy, is it, is going into music?
Yeah.
Have you found it, you've been able to give them any advice, or would they take it if you gave it to them?
About as much as I took it when my father gave me advice. I vowed that when my children decided to do something, I would support them as much as I could, because I do something I really love doing, and that's the best gift you can give them. If they really love something, do it. Because so few people have that chance, you know. People work in factories and they sweep streets and they do jobs they hate just because they have to earn a living. So if you're lucky enough to do something you love, then I think it's a parent's obligation to do what they can to help them. And Guy loves his bass and he loves his music, and what can I say? If he wants to make an album and I pay for it and it gets on the market and going, that's wonderful as far as I'm concerned.
I think I'm all in favour of nepotism. I think it's a wonderful institution.
He won't use my name. He doesn't want to do that. Nor will Jessica. Jessica hated the idea.
She's building a career in television.
Yes, she is. She's a journalist, really.
Yeah.
She went to Leeds and got a very good degree from there.
Now, you are getting, I think, towards the end of what's been a fairly extensive tour. If I may read your schedule correctly, in about 2 weeks you get a chance to go home, wherever home may be at the moment, because the last I heard you had a house and no furniture. Do you still have a house?
I have a house. It's still full of furniture.
Oh, good.
I mean, when we moved into it, we thought, you know, many years ago now, we thought, well, we've got enough to furnish this place, you know, from the house we had before. We were totally wrong. It had an entrance hall that needed furnishing and all sorts of things. Now we're downsizing, like as everybody else does. As you get towards the end of your career, you go down a little and live a bit more frugally. And this is what we're in the process of doing at the moment.
Now, you uttered some fateful words there, which I won't hold you to, but you said when you're getting towards the end of your career. Are you giving serious thought to retiring, or is it
No, I meant career as a parent.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a relief to a lot of people.
That's your major job in life, you know, is being a parent. And,
a quick aside, you are qualified as a private pilot. Do you still fly?
Well, I have my steel knees, which Hamilton Hall in Toronto put in.
Yes.
And I haven't actually been bold enough to go and ask the FAA to let me have a license on the strength of it. They probably will now, because they're wonderful, great success.
I'm reminded, very briefly as an aside, when you said that, reminded of somebody saying to me the other day that their father had got plastic hips, plastic knees, plastic joints in all his fingers. And they said, when he dies, I'm not sure whether we should bury him or recycle him, which I thought was appropriate. Listen, I know you're pressed, you've got a performance to do tonight, so I want to close with a question which is becoming sort of a tradition with me. When you talk to somebody who's been interviewed as often as you have, I imagine you've heard most questions, but it struck me, has you ever hoped that somebody would ask you a question that they never have asked, and if so, what is it, and what would the answer be?
Well, I think I've been asked almost everything that I can think of. But when you do stop, what will you do? That's which I'm seldom asked. Because this is such a peculiar life that to not have it would be a great strain. So I've got my fishing. I've made sure I've got lots to do afterwards.
Well, I got a suggestion. I mean, I got so far so good.
Yes.
Which the camera might be interested in. I found I had a bit of trouble tracking it down.
Yes.
What about a second part to that, because it ends...
We could easily do it. We could easily do it. There's so much has happened since that book was written. We thought of doing it, and we said, what would we call it? Probably So Far, So What?
Well, on that happy note, I'm delighted to hear that you're not actually contemplating retiring. I'm also extremely grateful to you for letting us spring this on you unannounced, and I'd just like to say thank you very much indeed.
It's a pleasure.
My land is Kenya, right from your highlands to the sea. You'll always stay with me here in my heart, here in my heart.